This is episode 684 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by New Mexico's field director, I believe. Maybe I'm missing the title there, but we become good friends in terms of our efforts on public policy in the state. And Americans for Prosperity is re-engaging here in New Mexico, and that is under the leadership of Sarah Hetemi, who is joining me for this particular episode. So welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Sarah.
Thank you, Paul. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And you almost got it right. I'm the state director of.
State director. All right. I know AFP has a little more in the way of different titles and various things. So, and you recently, I mean, at least I've seen the social media posts announcing you, although you've been engaged here working in New Mexico for what, 6 months?
Yes. So I moved here from Alaska last year at the end of May. And a bit of an opportunity to change the direction that we were going here. So we were going through some staff changes, and we just had some new goals of wanting to really engage politically. And so I made the move, was very excited to do so. I didn't really know exactly what it involved, but in coming here, within just a short few days, I fell in love with the state. And now that I've had a few months to really take it in, I am blown away by how gorgeous the state is, the mountains, the sun. I mean, why are we not called the sunshiny state? We have more sun than most states. We're right behind Utah with over 310 days of sun in Albuquerque. It's amazing. Four seasons, perfect weather. I mean, it blew my mind away.
All right. Before we get into a little bit about your personal story and you're coming to New Mexico from the frozen land of Alaska, why don't we talk about AFP, Americans for Prosperity? It is a national organization, and it has various chapters in. How many states do you have chapters in?
So we have chapters in 37 states. However, we have a presence in all 50. I want to say we are the largest grassroots organization, definitely in the nation, but I want to say in the world, who help people achieve their version of their American dream.
Very nice. And what kind of goals do you have? What is the broad? You're a free market organization, of course, but what are your organizational goals?
So, we are a free market organization, right? Who look to help people achieve their version of the American dream, whatever that is. So we help people break down barriers, and economically we're very free market based. But however, we also play in other spaces. So we're all about educational freedom and choice and parental rights, and that goes true for us in also healthcare. We're all about a personal option there. And then we focus deeply on free speech and legal and lawful immigration. So, how we can better secure our border and also make it easier and to immigrate here in a legal way.
And before I talk a little bit more about some of your personal background, etc., if people want to get involved with Americans for Prosperity, what's the best way to do that? What kind of activities do you engage in as well?
Oh gosh, we have a wide range of activities throughout the year, so it kind of depends on the season we're in. Right now, we're very focused on the legislature, and we're actually battling the largest tax increase in New Mexico history, being paid family medical leave, HB 11. And so there's a great opportunity to join us there. We're actually heading up to the Capitol tomorrow. We're going to bring around 20 to 25 people. And so you're more than welcome to join us. The best way to reach us is through our social media, Americans for Prosperity New Mexico. On Facebook or on Instagram. You can also just personally reach out to me. I have no problem with that. My number is 907-841-5970.
Excellent. Now, astute observers of Tipping Point, New Mexico's podcast may pick up an accent that they have not necessarily heard before. It's not a native New Mexican accent, to say the least. Obviously, you mentioned working in Alaska, but I have watched Northern Exposure and know that it's not necessarily an Alaskan accent either. So, tell us a little bit about your personal story and where you're from, some of the details on that.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Norway. My parents were immigrants actually from Kosovo, so Eastern Europe, to Norway. Actually, I lied. I was born in Sweden, but shortly after my parents immigrated to Norway. So,
Americans don't know the difference anyway, so don't worry. Especially in the 52nd state when it comes to education. I hate to break it to you. No, I'm slightly kidding, but not really, actually.
um, I love that. So for all I know, I was born and raised and grew up in Norway. And my parents worked really hard to give me and my sister a great life. And we had nothing but a great life. My parents were very hardworking, so they instilled that in us. They were also, I like to say, a little bit of freaks in the sense that they were hardcore assimilating. They truly assimilated. I was actually confused as a child for my first few years of my life. I thought I was Norwegian. Being born and raised, you don't know any better as a child. Although I looked rather different at being a pretty homogeneous. Gosh, I'm saying that word wrong.
Homogeneous, yeah. That's right.
Homogeneous country. I stood out quite a bit, especially back then when immigration hadn't really taken off. So I was a little confused, especially with my parents actually speaking Norwegian to each other at home. I thought that was, now that I'm an adult, I think that is really incredible. As a child, I didn't really appreciate how hard that must have been for them, as that just wasn't their native tongue. So I really was a confused child thinking I was Norwegian. And then around fifth grade, I realized, okay, I'm a Norwegian citizen, but biologically, I'm Eastern European. And actually, between fifth grade and eighth grade, it was crazy. By eighth grade, half of my class was immigrants. So by then, I really knew, and I felt like I had a little bit of an advantage with it being a homogeneous country, and everyone being so similar, at least having been there from birth. It was I didn't know any difference, so I was a Norwegian. It was easy for me to be a Norwegian, whereas that's not always the case for other immigrants. It's a little harder to actually assimilate. But my point being, with it being such a homogeneous society, where almost everyone looks the same and shares the same background, and kind of has a lot of the same educational foundation. From a young age, I was just really drawn to diversity and opportunity and differences in people and individualism. So really, that's what kind of started my idea from a very young age of I wanted to see what the US had and the opportunities, and then also kind of just the essence and the belief in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I thought it was so unique, and I still do, that, we're endowed upon us by the Creator, these rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like, I don't know that there's any other government in the world that actually has that in their documents. It's just really phenomenal. So I was always drawn to that and free speech and stuff like that. But I had a really wonderful life. And so it was just really me embarking upon this adventure when I became 18 and picking Alaska first. Because Alaska felt safe to me. It was somewhat similar to Norway. I had one friend in Alaska. It wasn't like New York or LA where there's millions of people, and I figured it'd be hard to make it. I wanted a place that would give me a chance, where I had the chance um to add some value in whatever way that would be.
So I'll just ask, are you a U.S. citizen or are you here as a resident? How does that work?
I am a US citizen. I'm really proud to say I became naturalized in 2022 July. And so I'm very proud of that and I'm very excited. And yeah, so
Well,
it's
congratulations. So,
thank you.
and now that you're living in New Mexico, which is somewhat part of the United States, although often, much like Norway and Sweden, and the nuances between those two places, New Mexico is often shunted aside and not considered a U.S. state. So you may have to work on another green card or some kind of new citizenship document for that. But um, so let's get into brass tacks here. We're talking about limited government, individual liberty right here in New Mexico, and building grassroots support for that. What are you guys doing in the New Mexico legislative session? What are some of your priorities? And if people want to engage with some of those efforts, I know you mentioned how they can, but one of them is very much on the move right now. So talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So you can join us again tomorrow. We're going down to the Capitol. HB 11 is going to come up in Commerce Committee, so we have a chance to voice our opinion, and really it's more important than ever for New Mexicans to voice their opinion, as this is going to affect them tremendously. Um, the bill itself is not even reflective of what other states have. It's not standardized, so it's very stringent and very burdensome. It's the only state actually that proposes paid family medical leave for a business of 5 employees or more. I don't believe I've heard of anything like that in other states. Have you, Paul?
I'm not familiar with all of the different states and their approaches, but yes, I am aware that New Mexico's proposed approach to paid family leave is really aggressive and very harmful to businesses.
Yeah, so we're suggesting, if anything, to go for an optional model like New Hampshire has. If it's so great, why not make it optional? That way, also, you're not forcing a burden potentially that one can't weather, and only those who want to can opt in. So we see that as a better solution, and we really think it's important that people stand up, speak to their representatives. They're there to represent us. So we should let them know that this truly isn't right for New Mexico, and it would add a big, tremendous burden on small businesses that are already suffering post COVID, and we already rank 35th in unemployment. So it's another area where we're not necessarily doing great compared to our neighbors on the west and east.
So, like Rio Grande Foundation, HB 11 paid family leave is really a top priority. Are there other issues that you see in this legislative session that could be particularly positive, or more likely, unfortunately, particularly negative?
Absolutely. So the to take it back a step, the way I look at the landscape here in New Mexico, for anyone who loves freedom and opportunity and wants to unleash its potential, there has to be a change in political leadership. The biggest difference between our neighbors to the east and west, being Arizona and Texas, is that their leaders, they're looking out for their people. They're looking for policies that create opportunity, freedom, and growth. And so we want to do the same, but when we look at our leaders in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, they seem to be wasting their time on the progressive flavor of the month, unfortunately. And so they're burdening New Mexicans with more taxes, more regulation, while just chasing the progressive flavor of the month. I mean, trying to eliminate oil and gas when that is our largest economic vehicle in the state. So, looking at that, our number one priority and our number one goal over the next few years, and it's going to be a long term goal, will be that we really need political change. And while we have a long way to go for that, we did have some success this past year in getting engaged and getting to grow our political muscle and our ability to help elect leaders who embrace and support policies that will create more opportunities and more freedom for New Mexicans. So we got to play a little bit in that, and we're really proud to say we won 6 out of 8 legislative races, um, and and we got to do a tremendous amount of work on that, which was really exciting. We had over 120 folks out in our key districts, priority districts, knocking doors. We knocked over 100,000 doors in the previous election cycle in order to get these folks across the finish line. We're really excited that there is some new blood. There's a slate of new legislators coming in. So it's a little bit of a hopeful time, but we want to keep that rolling. We want to keep that going. And we want to keep electing candidates who believe that the way to fix New Mexico is to have a more liberty-oriented policies and less taxes, less regulation, and more parental rights. So we're really proud of that.
Yeah, so you're engaging on the front end, if you will, with the political elections and who gets to Santa Fe, as well as other you know, other areas of the state. But you're focusing as well on getting people involved, more, the average citizen involved in the legislative process as well, and showing up to committee hearings, and I'm assuming also emailing or contacting legislators. You do a lot of phone banking, right?
Yes, so for the past few weeks, we've been calling heavily a couple of key legislators, key members on the Commerce Committee in hopes to just let them know how New Mexicans are feeling about this and what impact it's going to have on them. And for them to at least consider the improvements to the bill that would make it better. And best of all, just to drop it.
Excellent. Any other state or local level policies that you're kind of focused on these days, or more broadly speaking, anything longer term?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, with our leaders in Santa Fe and Albuquerque choosing the progressive flavor of the month and trying to legislate out our reliable energy, being oil and gas, as there's an abundance of them. That's one of our top priorities is to protect our economic engine in energy, and not just go for reliable energy as it's, or not just go for renewable energy as it's not reliable. So that's one of our top priorities, and we are the second largest oil producer in the United States. So it's not only a help to New Mexicans, but it's a help to all Americans.
All right. Well, that's at the state level. Now, nationally, you also work in Washington and engage in federal policies as well, specifically the Trump tax cuts. What is going on with the Trump tax cuts, and how are you trying to engage New Mexicans and Americans in those areas?
Yes, so we're proud to once again come alongside President Trump and his very successful tax cuts that was passed in 2017. We did a tremendous amount of work in 2017 and trying to pass them, and now we're trying to make sure they continue. So we're pressuring key senators and representatives and certain committees and folks who need extra pressure, who are leaning the wrong way, to vote the right way to ensure that these tax cuts continue. And they would mean they would have a tremendous effect on New Mexicans if they didn't pass. If they didn't pass, New Mexicans would be looking at around an additional $1,800 in taxes, and businesses would be looking at an additional $700 in taxes. Small businesses, not something we can exactly afford with the state we're already in. We're rather poor per capita, the people, not the state. That sits on at least a $3 billion surplus, nearly $4 million surplus, and a whole other topic is the permanent fund. But our people don't see that same benefit. So that's a big campaign we launched. It's a $20 million campaign nationwide, and I believe we are the largest conservative grassroots organization to have jumped in on this. So I'm really excited about that. Something else we wrapped up nationally also in elections was that we got involved in 647 races this past year. 7 U.S. Senate races, 6 of those were critical pickup opportunities, and 44 House races. So those are some of the things we've been doing nationally.
Now, do you think realistically any of New Mexico's elected members of Congress will uh, be willing to? I mean, I know that you can't commit; it's not ultimately your decision on these things, but I presume you're not targeting all five members of New Mexico's congressional delegation.
No.
You're focused on one, maybe two.
So actually, the New Mexico delegation isn't targeted. They're not ones that we see as movable.
Okay.
So they're not on our list of targets, and I guess it's not surprising why. I'm not sure that our delegation really represents all the Mexicans the best way. So
So not even Gabe Vasquez, who's in a pretty tight district.
no, I will say though, he seems to have gotten politically smarter. So maybe he will vote the right way and do what's right by New Mexicans.
Well, miracles can happen. So, anything else specifically about AFP and issues you're working on either here in New Mexico or nationwide?
We're also working on educational choice, educational freedom. And so we're really excited to see a couple of bills being introduced that have to do with open enrollment. I see that as the first step towards educational choice and freedom. We shouldn't be tied down by our zip codes. And folks in South Valley should have the same opportunities that folks in Northeast Heights.
So what does that mean? Because obviously, New Mexico's not in line for, and politically is just not prepared to do what we at the Rio Grande Foundation and I presume AFP would want with regard to broad-based private school choice. You've got a campaign called No Lines. Talk a little bit about how
No more
no more
lines.
lines. Yes.
Yes, essentially what that means, it just means you're not bound by your zip code. You're not bound by your district. And if you're in a failing school district, you're not bound by that. But even if you're not in a failing school district, let's say you're in a school district that's okay, but your child doesn't like it, it's not right for them, well, you have the opportunity and chance to place them in a different public school. No More Lines essentially takes away districts, zip codes when it comes to what public school your child can go to. So it just kind of creates the same opportunities for the single mom on the South Valley to put their kids in the same good performing school as folks in Rio Rancho or folks in Northeast Heights or wherever the competing schools are. So it just gives everyone more opportunity, more choice, and what's not to like with that?
So it is a form of school choice that involves, allowing children or children's families to choose between all the different public schools available or government-run schools. So in between districts, uh, I guess within APS, or perhaps if kids from APS wanted to go to Rio Rancho, or is that what we're talking about here?
That's right. And that's the first step, but the ultimate goal would be to do what with us being in 37 states and me being in this role. What's so cool is I get to talk to my colleagues and see what they're doing in their states. And I just spoke to Tori, who is the state director of Tennessee, and they just passed educational savings accounts that they've been working on for years. Super excited for them, and that would be the ultimate goal for us. So with representatives who keep more opportunity, more freedom, and more liberty in mind, we're also able to get there.
Yeah. Now, um, under Susana Martinez, there was some kind of inter-district choice set up by the A-F grading system, and if schools didn't perform well enough, the kids in those particular schools would be able to choose the district that's available to them. But currently, that is not available because it was essentially repealed by the current governor. Is that correct?
That is correct. So there's really no way of even knowing if you're in a failing school district. So that's a whole nother issue in itself, and adds to the issue of we truly need open enrollment. We can't be restricted by districts.
Now, I know AFP supports school choice, and that's one aspect of your agenda, do you see New Mexico? I mean, obviously, we're dead last in education according to the latest NAEP scores, and actually the last two rounds of NAEP scores. Uh, do you are you surprised that more New Mexico political leaders aren't talking about this? It's interesting because if you look at the NAEP scores, I believe 3 out of the 4 of the testing areas, fourth grade reading, I forget which one was not, but Alaska is not exactly a state that performs well in education either. That's what I'm getting at. You're like second to last, right above New Mexico.
Right.
What's up with that?
Well, Alaska, like New Mexico, faces its unique challenges, and Alaska very much so, being the largest state geographically, and us having a lot of villages that are hard to get to and communities that are hard to get to. Alaska is the highest federally subsidized state. So we share some of the common mistakes. But Alaska, I believe, suffers from a major spending problem, along with not embracing school choice fully. And I think we suffer from some of the same. And I just think that solution is truly to look at what our neighbors are doing that are so successful in this, and to look at Arizona with educational savings accounts. Texas is moving that direction, and we're lagging behind. That seems to be the case on just about everything. And another exciting policy I saw pass was New Hampshire just got rid of their income tax on interest and dividends because they already didn't have an income tax, which, by the way, we shouldn't have an income tax. I'm not sure that I know of any other oil and gas state that produces to the level we do and has the budget we have, yet we have an income tax. And our people are just not. Our people are feeling the burden. We have some of the poorest people per capita, yet we're taxing them. And we have a gross receipts tax, which can be compared to a European value-added tax. So I don't know how much of a friendly environment we have here. And there's a lot that needs to change. There's a lot we can learn from our neighbors. And really, we should be competitive, wanting to beat our neighbors.
All right. Any other policy areas or things that you specifically want to share or highlight that you're working on with Americans for Prosperity?
No, just seek us out. Come join us. We would love your help in educational choice. We would love your help in standing up for taxpayers. We would love your help in supporting our number one industry. So, yeah, we would love your involvement. We're here year round. We're not like a campaign that packs up during session. We're involved in session and issues like we've talked about here, and then we're politically involved, and we're also year-round in the community, holding events, holding educational events, helping people take action, helping them get connected to their legislators, and helping them find their voice. It's a lot more fun when you're doing it as a group than alone. There's power in numbers.
All right. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for all the activism that you engage in and your colleagues in the organization, because that's something that very much can contribute to, further amplify our efforts here in New Mexico as well. And so we need both the ideas as well as the activism itself. I guess I want to get back to some of the personal thoughts in terms of, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Nordic countries, that group of nations up there, Denmark, they're known as a high welfare state, but to call them socialist is certainly inaccurate. What are some of the things that you think, maybe whether it's America or New Mexico or some of these other states, where do you see some of the similarities and differences, and what do Americans get wrong about some of those countries, especially your home of Norway?
Yeah, I actually think that's a great question because I hear a lot of Americans talk about, the Scandinavian life and how it's so nice, and you have free education and you have free healthcare and no worries. And so
we have those things too, by the way. Not saying they're what you want to have, but they exist. It's
they do.
So anyway, go ahead.
But I I like to think that most Americans would not thrive, and why is Americans like their options. Americans like opportunity, and Americans like to speak their mind. That's one of the main things that I was drawn to here is that our Constitution and our beliefs are reflected in how the people are. So it's hard to find an American who doesn't talk your ear off, and that's because we're opinionated, we're willing to fail, and by being willing to fail, you're going to succeed. And we have this tremendous belief in ourselves and others and people and their unique abilities. And I think that more than anything else kind of just lacks everywhere else in the world. And although Norway is fantastic, there's a reason there is no Norwegian dream. There's a reason there is the American dream. So yeah, I think some things that drove me out of Norway at a young age, and probably I'm a little bit of a weirdo for that, but probably drives out the rich in Norway as just the extreme taxation and regulation. And this is random and a new fact I'm sharing, but I was just in Norway over Christmas visiting my mom and sister, and I was shocked to know like I couldn't buy Benadryl. So I have allergies, and sometimes I take a Benadryl, and I like to sometimes take it to go to sleep, and you can't even get it prescribed because it causes drowsiness, and so they see that as dangerous. And I just thought that was
Is marijuana legal in
no,
Norway? No.
no.
Okay.
I
Just
think
wondering.
if Benadryl isn't, I think we got along.
I figured, well, here in New Mexico, we're talking about increasing alcohol taxes and decreasing taxes on marijuana. So I figure that maybe they were doing some of the same things. Now,
As a Norwegian, I'll tell you, sin taxes do not work. I mean, we got some of the most expensive alcohol and some of the most expensive tobacco, and people are chewing their hearts out. And when they do drink, they drink themselves to oblivion. So they may not drink as often, but when they do, they really go hard. So it doesn't really work.
and one kind of last thing is that I guess the unifying factor of all three, Norway, Alaska, and New Mexico, is that they have massive oil and gas prosperity, or at least prosperity within that context. Alaska is well known in the United States. It's fallen off in recent years. New Mexico's kind of been the up and comer and really has uh, obviously grown in its oil and gas wealth. But Norway is a very big oil and gas producing nation. And how does that affect things in Norway?
Yeah, how fun is that? Isn't it weird that I'm just somehow in every single oil
We'll get you a
producing?
hard hat.
I should have been in oil. No, so Norway is rich on oil. It's a very rich country on oil. And unlike, I guess, Alaska and New Mexico, how they believe that wealth is disturbed or distributed is through uh, services. So free education, free healthcare, and then they also have a major rainy day fund for the future in case something bad happens, which I happen to kind of disagree with to some term and extent. I think the people of Norway are taxed at an extraordinarily rate and regulated at an extraordinarily rate. I guess if we're comparing the three, I think Alaska has a nice tax structure to their people for being rich on oil and gas. And I don't, if you don't need to tax your people, why are you taxing them? So,
Yeah, Alaska certainly has no personal income tax and no sales tax. New Mexico mostly really funds government, and we'll just say that we don't have necessarily the high social attainment levels that you have in Norway. We can have a massive debate and a really interesting sociological conversation about all of that, which we will have to save for either a beer or another time on Tipping Point, New Mexico. But why don't we, with our oil and gas, have some of the same social outcomes that Norway has? And how does Sweden do so darn well, really, without oil and gas? And they have, of course, IKEA and Nokia and all these big I think Nokia is from Sweden.
That's a great point. And to point that out, I actually am very impressed more so with Sweden than Norway because they don't have oil and gas to rely on, and they kind of are a free market country. And actually, how they handled COVID is really interesting too. I thought they did a phenomenal job. They kept everything open for the most part, and so they're very different than Norway. They're not reliant upon one resource for their economy. Their economy is very diversified and they're very entrepreneurial. So it's very cool. I think a big reason too, so many people look at Norway or Sweden and say, why can't that work in America? Well, America is massive. We're 50 states and we have 55 million people. It looks a little different. There's 5.5 million people in Norway, and up until recent history, it was a very singular, homogenous culture. So it's probably a little easier to accommodate and make that work. All that to say, the foundations are entirely different.
Well, we have about almost 350 million people in the United States. And I was wrong. Nokia is a Finnish company. Ericsson, Electrolux, H&M, of course, IKEA, Volvo, Spotify, all are from Sweden. So they definitely have a large number. And I think that is a reality of maybe not the resource curse necessarily, but definitely having those the natural resources can be related to less innovation and less of a private sector corporate orientation. So with that, I appreciate your time today. And it's AFPNM.org. Is that what's your New Mexico chapter website? How do people find you specifically?
We're still in the progress of creating our website for New Mexico. So our best place for now is social media. Americans for Prosperity New Mexico, both on Facebook and Instagram, is the best place to reach us right now. Or just reach me directly at 907-841-5970.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.